Dari shivered, pulling his coat tighter against the biting wind. The coastal town of Innsmouth was always cold, but tonight, the chill seemed to pierce his very bones. A thick fog rolled in from the sea, obscuring the already dim streetlights. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, whispering of ancient secrets best left undisturbed. Dari, a simple librarian, was drawn to this desolate town by a faded manuscript. He dismissed it as fantasy, yet here he was, alone in the deepening darkness. A dog howled in the distance, the sound mournful and full of primal fear. Dari quickened his pace, his footsteps echoing on the deserted cobblestone streets. He just wanted to find his inn, a warm fire, and forget the unsettling atmosphere of this cursed town. As he rounded a corner, the wind seemed to pick up, swirling the fog into grotesque shapes. He thought he saw a figure standing at the end of the street, tall and imposing, but when he blinked, it was gone. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, hunted by something unseen and malevolent. The fog grew thicker, pressing in on him like a suffocating blanket. He could barely see a foot in front of him. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, sending shivers down his spine. Dari stumbled on, lost and disoriented. A voice, low and smooth as velvet, cut through the swirling mist. "Lost, are we?" it asked. Dari spun around, searching for the source of the voice. The fog seemed to part slightly, revealing a tall figure shrouded in shadow. He couldn't make out any features, only the faint outline of a man. "Who's there?" Dari asked, his voice trembling. The figure stepped closer, and Dari felt a chill run down his spine. The stranger radiated an aura of power, ancient and terrible. It was as if the very air around him crackled with unseen energy. "A friend," the figure replied, his voice a hypnotic purr. "I can help you find your way." Dari hesitated, torn between caution and his desperate need for direction. The stranger seemed to emanate an unnatural magnetism, drawing him in. He tried to resist, but the stranger's gaze held him captive. The stranger's eyes pierced the gloom, burning with an unnatural intensity. They seemed to bore into Dari's very soul, reading his deepest fears and desires. "I know what you seek," the stranger said, his voice a low murmur in Dari's ear. "The knowledge hidden within the ancient texts, the power to change the world." Dari took a step back, fear gripping his heart. How did this stranger know about the manuscript? About his thirst for forbidden knowledge? "Who are you?" Dari whispered, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. The stranger smiled, a slow, chillingly beautiful expression that sent shivers down Dari's spine. "You may call me Asmodeus," he said. The name struck a chord of terror in Dari's heart. Asmodeus. A name whispered in hushed tones in the ancient texts. A name synonymous with darkness and forbidden power. "What do you want?" Dari asked, his voice strained. Asmodeus chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the town. "I want to offer you a gift," he said, "the knowledge you seek, the power to reshape the world in your image." Dari stared at the being before him, his mind reeling. The power Asmodeus offered was intoxicating, but a cold dread settled in his stomach. What price would he have to pay for such forbidden knowledge? Dari asked, his voice barely a whisper. He knew any deal with this creature would come at a terrible cost. Asmodeus smiled again, and Dari felt a chill run down his spine, a mere pledge of loyalty, a recognition of my authority. The fog swirled around them, growing colder. Dari felt a growing sense of unease. "And what of the world?" Dari asked, his voice trembling. Asmodeus's eyes seemed to burn brighter. "The world will be remade. A new order will rise, one ruled by power, not by weakness." The symbol on Asmodeus's hand pulsed with an unnatural light, casting grotesque shadows across his face. It seemed to writhe and twist, a living thing of pure darkness. Dari recognized it from the ancient texts, a mark of unspeakable power and corruption. "This mark," Asmodeus said, his voice like velvet over steel, "will seal our pact. It will grant you access to knowledge beyond your wildest dreams." Dari hesitated, his mind a maelstrom of fear and desire. The promise of forbidden knowledge warred with the primal terror that emanated from the being before him. The air grew colder, the stench of sulfur overwhelming. "Choose wisely," Asmodeus whispered, his voice a sibilant hiss. "Time is short, and the world waits for its new master." He extended his hand further, the symbol burning brighter, its heat searing Dari's skin even from a distance. The decision felt monumental, a choice that would irrevocably alter the course of his life, and perhaps the fate of the world. A wave of dizziness washed over Dari. He stumbled back, breaking eye contact with Asmodeus. The stranger's words echoed in his mind, promises of power intertwined with veiled threats. But something felt wrong, a discordant note in the symphony of temptation. He thought of the manuscript, of the warnings scribbled in the margins by its frantic author. Warnings of a being who offered the world in exchange for a soul, a being who thrived on chaos and despair. Why? Dari croaked, his voice hoarse with fear. Why me? Asmodeus tilted his head, a flicker of amusement crossing his features. You doubt, he said, his voice losing some of its hypnotic quality. That is unexpected. I need to understand, Dari stammered, his mind racing. What will become of me? Of the world? Asmodeus stepped closer, and for the first time, Dari noticed a flicker of impatience in his eyes. You waste time with trivial concerns, he said, his voice laced with a hint of menace. The wind howled around them, whipping the fog into a frenzy. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, and the temperature plummeted. Above, the sky churned, dark clouds gathering as if summoned by Asmodeus's growing anger. Choose, Asmodeus commanded, his voice like thunder. Accept your destiny, or be consumed by it. Dari felt trapped, caught between the allure of forbidden knowledge and the overwhelming sense of dread that emanated from the being before him. He looked around at the deserted street, at the oppressive fog, and he knew, with chilling certainty, that this was no ordinary storm. I need more time, Dari stammered, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. Asmodeus laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the empty streets. Time is a luxury I do not offer, he said, his eyes burning with cold fire. The symbol on his hand flared, bathing the street in an infernal light. The air grew thick with the stench of sulfur, and a low growl rumbled deep within Asmodeus's chest. Dari's mind raced, desperately searching for an escape. He knew he couldn't outrun this creature, couldn't fight him with conventional means. He had to find another way, a way to appeal to something other than Asmodeus's lust for power. You claim to offer knowledge, Dari said, his voice trembling but firm. But true knowledge comes from understanding, from compassion, not from domination. Asmodeus froze, his expression unreadable. For a moment the wind died down, the fog swirling lazily around them as if holding its breath. Compassion? Asmodeus repeated, his voice laced with a chilling amusement. A curious concept. And what makes you think I am not compassionate? Dari met his gaze, summoning every ounce of courage he possessed. Because true power doesn't need to coerce or control, he said, his voice gaining strength. It inspires, it uplifts, it guides. A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant crashing of waves. Asmodeus studied Dari, his expression unreadable. The air crackled with a palpable tension, the feeling of a predator sizing up its prey. Then, to Dari's surprise, Asmodeus threw back his head and laughed. It was a chilling sound, devoid of mirth, echoing through the empty streets like the tolling of a funeral bell. Intriguing, Asmodeus said, his voice laced with a newfound respect. You possess a will stronger than I anticipated. He lowered his gaze, the symbol on his hand dimming slightly. Very well, I will grant you your wish. Dari held his breath, unsure what to expect. The air remained thick with tension, the fog swirling around them like a living entity. Asmodeus extended his hand once more, but this time the symbol was gone, replaced by a single shimmering tear. This, Asmodeus said, his voice surprisingly gentle, is a tear of creation. It contains the knowledge you seek, but be warned, it comes at a price. Dari stared at the tear, its surface reflecting 1,000 images, 1,000 possibilities. He felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow emanating from it, a profound sadness that seemed to whisper of the universe's endless cycle of creation and destruction. What is the price? Dari asked, his voice barely a whisper. Asmodeus smiled, a sad, wistful expression that tugged at Dari's heart. The price, he said, is the knowledge that some things cannot be changed, that some wounds never heal. With a sigh, Asmodeus flicked his wrist, sending the tear arcing towards Dari. He caught it instinctively, the tear melting into his palm, searing him with its cold fire. Images flooded his mind, visions of distant galaxies, of the birth and death of stars, of the rise and fall of civilizations. He saw humanity's potential for both great good and terrible evil, the constant struggle between light and darkness. And he understood, with a clarity that chilled him to his core, that the choice was not his to make. The world would continue its course, for better or for worse. The fog began to recede, revealing the deserted street bathed in the pale light of dawn. Asmodeus was gone, vanished without a trace. Dari stood there for a long moment, his mind reeling from the encounter. He felt drained, emptied, yet strangely at peace. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had gazed back. But he had emerged, changed, forever marked by his encounter with the darkness. He no longer sought forbidden knowledge, no longer craved the power to reshape the world. He had seen too much, felt too much. As he turned to leave, the first rays of sunlight broke through the retreating clouds, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. But even the warmth of the rising sun couldn't dispel the lingering chill in his heart. He had escaped the clutches of the Antichrist, but he knew, with chilling certainty, that their paths would cross again, and when they did, he would be ready.